if the purpose of the liberation wars was to reclaim the land from the colonizers, and the methods had been updated from a political approach and upped to a political approach and a military approach. Now, we must understand that when ZAPU and ZANU changed their political approach and added a military element, they had realized that the Smith regime was recalcitrant and had a high view of themselves, and ZAPU and ZANU had to bring their comeuppance. They had to bring them to account, not just militarily but politically. But one must understand that the purpose of this was to get the land back and control the political system, which means we needed to also control the flow of economic resources. Then it was unfortunate that at the time the ZAPU and ZANU were fighting against the Smith regime, they were divided. Zipra were calling Zanla Opas. Zanla were calling Zipra Amachowachowa. Now, doing that was also not helping to liberate the country, but it was only helping the political leaders of the two parties. It had nothing to do with the people. Calling Zanla Opas and calling Zipra Machwachwa, it did not benefit Zimbabweans in any way. I will tell you this. It only served to delay the liberation of Zimbabwe. Having said that, as it had happened. We need to move forward. They realized that before the Lancaster Conference, to sign the Lancaster Agreement, they needed to come together again as a patriotic front, which they did. I can imagine there were a lot of differences and there were a lot of preferences. Then we must understand that Josiah Tongogara, the commander, the then commander-in-chief of Zanla, had a history with ZAPU. And at that time, the political leader and the PA system of the Zanla was Robert Mugabe, who became president after the elections. Even at Lancaster House, it was Robert Mugabe who was the spokesman of the Patriotic Front. Why? It may be obvious to some of us, but for others, it's not. Because Dr. Joshua Nkomo was also a well-spoken person. But in terms of footprint, Zanla had more footprint than Zipra. Because in terms of footprint, Zipra had covered areas from Mat North and Marsh West, part of Marsh West, all the way to Mpoing's border, on Botswana border, a part of Bubi district, almost to Mwenezi. Then when we get to the areas like Shiredzi going east, Zipra had no large footprint. Yes, a number of them had attempted to enter those areas, but Zanla in those areas had a lot of skirmishes with the Rhodesian army, and they had a lot of political mileage in those areas. And the airtime they had bought by carrying arms had made them have time enough to have structures in the civilian populations, on the rural areas, and in parts of the farms where they had a political a footprint. It had gone to the extent that some of the farmers in those areas where ZANU was operating were actually buying boots, buying medicines, buying clothes for the Zanlas. They had an approach of working with those farmers, but you have to understand all the farmers were in the military. But not all the farmers agreed with the approach of the Smith regime. So with that in mind, Zanla had a principle called kuzipakata hakuzi kuziridza, meaning that carrying guns does not mean that you have to fire them. So if there was, for instance, a farmer who was hostile, I will give an example like one called Swanika in the areas of Lundi River or Runde, if you like, bordering Sushabane and Masvingo provinces. The guy was hostile and he killed so many civilians in that area, and the civilians were never compensated to this day. He killed civilians who were looking after their cattle, who did not come to attack him or anything. But a number of times when Zanla tried to go and capture him and attack him, for some reason they could not locate him. He even had a crocodile called Peter. He fed human beings to crocodiles, that farmer. By the end of the war, he had escaped. I think he moved out of the country or wherever he went. But I'm just giving this example to show you that the purpose of carrying guns was not to create a genocide or to have a military victory. Oh, that was the approach of the Zanla side. This is why the Zanlas had small skirmishes which never lasted more than 2 days. Or for the most part, it never lasted more than a day. The second day would have been when the Smith regime was trying to clean a battleground. Zanla was also trying to clean with the Amjibas. They would go there also and collect things and collect papers, collect guns, collect the injured and collect everything, medicines, collect weapons and so forth. This is the approach Zanla never had an approach where they would stand and shout and start forming lines and fighting. No, they never did that. They were satisfied to disrupt the enemy. Even if they went into a town, like they went into Masvingo or Harare or Bulawayo or Shabane, what they did was they would prepare, and at very odd hours they would go into town, maybe going into a public place and fire a few shots and collect a few people and talk to them and tell them that they are here, they were here, and by the time they finish their firing, they are already gone. So their idea was to make the enemy as uncomfortable as possible. And there's another theory that they called Tambawaka Chenjera. This theory meant that this was not your war, even if you're a guerrilla or a mjipa or a chimbrido or a supporter. This is a people's war. So you have to play cleverly. If you try to own the war, you risk getting swallowed by the war. Many instances, people who wanted to own the war, some of them died, some of them got mad, some of them ended up resenting the war because of their approach, not because of the war. And there's another saying, the Karanga say that Zimbabwe haisi ya mai ndia baba. That means Zimbabwe is not your mother's country, it's your father's country. If you think it's your mother's country and you want to own it, you have a problem. Because your mother, you will treat you like you are an egg. Your father will kick you behind. So you must understand that it's rough. You must be a responsible person when you approach issues of politics and war. Respect. This is why they had a song called Nzirazema Soldier. That was the manual of approaching not only the civilians, but also the enemy and the captured enemy and the property of the civilians and the captured civilians. So you find that in most areas, even okay, let's go back to let's go back to the footprint. ZAPU definitely fought very pitched battles and they were brave. They fought in the Deka areas, in the corner areas, in the Lerato areas, in the Tech Mine areas, in the Brunapeg areas. They fought serious battles, which if you go now, and the people who were there, they will tell you the Smith regime had a hard time. They had a lot of large losses. So in doing so, in fighting those wars, they were exposing themselves and they were limiting their footprint, their political footprint. That limitations gave Zanla more time to go into their areas, which they no area was anyone's area. But in this case, I'm talking in terms of people who are talking about the Mtwakazi thing, Mtwakazi. And people who say Mtwakazi, they don't even know what Mtwakazi means. Because Mtwakazi is not even a Ndebele word. So I will tell you this. There are many people who resent the current government, and rightly so, in terms of maybe the way things went and the way things may be going. But the key word I will say is that a government is always smaller than the people who fought to put it into power. And we must understand that a government to be in power is put by many. But the tenders and and command positions will be only attained by a few. So it is only reasonable for those few to address the concerns of the many. But they can only address the concerns of the many if the many form themselves into cells and approach those few in a reasonable way. I think I should thank you. Please, if you have any comments, please subscribe to my page and make your comments. And even if you don't like what I said, I know what I'm saying is we will not all agree on this. But subscribe and make your comments. Just don't use inhlamba. Don't use istuko. Be constructive. Because there is no way distraction can, and a destructive approach and a tribalistic approach can solve this Zimbabwean problem, or a South African problem, or a Mozambican problem, or an Angolan problem, or a Namibian problems. The problems you see in Zimbabwe, which is popular because they moved out farmers. That's why you know about problems, because the white press is magnifying the problems in Zimbabwe, because they want the white farmers who say they came with land in Zimbabwe, in which case is not true. The Zimbabwean land is for Zimbabweans. all the farmers who want to farm in Zimbabwe, whether white or black, they can farm, but under not as their farms. This is the land of the people. Remember, it's Zimbabwean people. The project of separating Matebele land and Mashona land is one of those projects that will not succeed, in my view. But I may be wrong. A lot of people have been wrong before. I want to thank you.